Hello everyone, myself Amit. Today we will see how we can use Docker Compose to run multiple containers that are part of a microservices. So as you know, like running multiple containers and do the development and troubleshooting and deployment is very time consuming and complex. But if we are using Docker Compose, we can reduce this complexity very easily. Okay, so we will see one small demo in which we will see like end to end how we can deploy three-tier application using Docker Compose. Okay, so it contains front end, back end, and a database. So let's begin. Before starting our tutorial, so there are few prerequisites installation on your machine. Okay, to do this tutorial. So first of all, Docker Compose should be installed on your machine. If it is not installed, then you could not able to use Docker Compose. But good news is, if you have already installed a Docker desktop on your machine, automatically Docker Compose will be installed on your machine. So it is a straightforward how to do the installation, and Docker Compose is available for Linux, Mac, and Windows. So hope this is already installed on your machine. So inside the Visual Studio, I have opened my application. Okay, so this is simple three-tier application with backend, front end, and MongoDB is there. Okay, so front end is where it will be open on browser. Backend it contains API, and then API is communicating with database, which is MongoDB. Okay, so for each application, like for front end, backend, and MongoDB, we have separate containers. Okay, so if you see here in front end, we have a Docker file. Okay, so this Docker file will contain Docker image, and then we can spin Docker container for this. Okay, so this is straightforward like node package and all those things, which is helpful to start front end. Okay, and npm start. After that, like this is a backend again, and we have a Docker file. You can see Docker this. Okay. Apart from this, there is a MongoDB that we will directly install using Docker Hub. Okay, so we will pull Docker image for MongoDB and we will spin it. So before moving to Docker Compose, if we have to run this application without Docker Compose, then what is the process for that? We need to build each image individually and run each container separately. Okay, so first of all we need to run docker build for front end, then docker run. After that we need to move to docker for backend also. We need to do the same commands, docker build and docker run, and then we need to pull image from for MongoDB, we need to pull image from Docker Hub. Okay, so and after that, like we need to make sure all these containers which are running should communicate with each other. So this is like a very complex process. We can say if there are more containers, more than two containers, three containers. In some of the application, developers are creating like hundreds of containers. So you can imagine the complexity, like how much complex this would be to do the development if you have to make changes or run applications. So it is a very time consuming and very complex. So to resolve this complexity, we usually use Docker Compose when we are doing the development locally. Okay, so this Docker Compose help to make sure our development and deployment is efficient and smooth, and it helps developer to easily do dockerization of applications, especially in microservice type of applications. Okay, so for this application, microservice application, so let's create Docker Compose file and see how we can run it. Okay, so first of all we need to add Docker Compose file. Okay, so this is the Docker Compose file. So we need to add each application that we have, like front end, back end, uh, front end. So Docker Compose should be outside. I mistakenly create inside backend folder. It should be outside. Okay. Okay. So inside Docker Compose, we need to write YAML code for each application. Okay. Each application is mentioned here as a services, and then we create networking so that all these applications are inside the same network and can communicate with each other. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. Okay, so let's begin with creating the code for Docker Compose. Okay, so first of all, we need to give the version of Docker Compose that we are using for this purpose for creating Docker Compose file. Okay, so so first of all, we need to mention the version. We are using 3.8 like this. And after that, we need to write each services. Okay, so whatever services we are using, that should come under services tag. Okay, so this is the services tag that we are mentioning. And after that, for each service like front end, back end, and database, whatever is there, we will mention one by one. Okay, so first of all, for front end, we will write the code. Okay, so instead of typing everything and wasting your time, I will try to mm, write directly. Okay, so inside the services we are mentioning web. Okay, web is nothing but for front end. Okay, so we are mentioning where the docker file is present for this particular front end. So docker file is present inside front end folder. So this is the folder, and inside that we have docker. So we are mentioning like this. After that, we are mentioning this front end is depend on API, or API is nothing but backend. Okay, so that's why we are mentioning depends on. So what will happen, like once we create all the when we mention all the services, then we start like building. So based on the dependency, it will build and start those services. Okay, if API is mentioned here, that means it will build first API, then start that API container, and after that it will come here and start web container. Okay, after that we are mentioning we are exposing port 30,000. Okay, so this is nothing but, if you remember, like how we run locally. Okay, if we have to run the single container. Okay, in that case we mention docker run, and after that we mention port, and we expose the port uh, locally from the docker host. Okay, so like this. So this is nothing but similarly we are doing here. For instead of doing all this like commands, running all command build and run individually, we are creating docker compose. So, and this is the purpose of docker compose. After that we are mentioning the network. Okay, so all our services should be part of single network that is specific to our application, this 3 tier web application. Okay, and after that, this is for web. Similarly, we will create service for API. Okay, so like this I have mentioned API also. This is a YAML, so make sure like the indentation is properly maintained, otherwise it will give error. Okay, here also like this is the another service API, that is nothing but backend. So we are mentioning the folder where backend is present, where backend docker file is present. Okay, and again we are mentioning backend is depend on database, that is nothing but MongoDB service. Okay, and again we are exposing at 3000, 3000, 3001, 3001. Why we are mentioning 3000? Because inside the docker file for our backend we are exposing the backend service on 3001. Okay, and that's why we mention here 3001. Okay, and then we are exposing locally at 3001 again. Okay, this is also part of same network, like front end and back end both are part of same network. Okay, this is here. And after that we will mention database. Okay, so back end we are using as MongoDB, so we will mention like that. Okay, definition is very important. So this is third service, nothing but our database MongoDB. So here we are using MongoDB Docker image. Okay, so if this Docker image is not present locally, then it will pull from Docker Hub. Okay, so that's why we mention MongoDB. Okay, and we have created volume also for this image. Okay, so that all our data, whatever like database, this MongoDB database persist inside the files, that will go at this location. Okay, we are creating the volume, and we are pointing data db inside our MongoDB container. Okay, and also we need few environment variables also. Okay, so these are the environment variables that we want to use. we want to give some username, we can mention anything. Okay, and password we can mention as a password. Okay, that is fine. Okay, so these are the username password that will be set as a root username password for this database. Okay, so like this we can pass like additional environment variables also. Okay, and after that, similar to this, like if you want to expose MongoDB, you want to access it from locally, you can uncomment this particular port. If you don't want to access like database, then this port is not required. But if you like to access it, then you need to uncomment this particular code like this. Okay, so this is done. So all three services we have mentioned: web, API, and MongoDB. Okay, and what is remaining then? So here, like in image, we have not mentioned any tag. That means it will always pull the latest image of MongoDB. Okay, after that we will mention volume and network. Okay, so if you have seen here, we have created network as network backend, and also we have used volume also. Okay, MongoDB data. Okay, so we need to mention that also in our docker compose. Okay, network and volume. So these are the important like 90-95% tag or keywords that we use inside docker compose. There are few more things are there, but that those are not very common. Okay, so these are the very almost like we use in 95% of projects. Okay, volumes, we need volume if we want to purchase some data on local machine. Okay, local host. So in that case we can explicitly mention like this, and we can expose this. Why we are doing? So that we can access the data from outside also. Okay, outside docker. We created network backend. Why? Because we want like all these three containers, part of the application should be contained inside one network. Okay, so that they can communicate with each other using host name. Okay, instead of IP address. Okay, so how they will come? So so consider like API is there. API want to communicate with MongoDB. So instead of getting like MongoDB IP address, private IP address, it can access it using MongoDB. MongoDB is nothing but it will act as a like service name, application name also, and plus this will act as DNS name also for our MongoDB. Okay, so for that purpose, this is very useful. So this is how we create a Docker Compose. Okay, so let's run this and check whether our 3TR application is working on. Okay, using Docker Compose. Similar to Docker, we where we have a lot of different commands are there like Docker run, Docker build. Okay, Docker post start. Similar to that, we for Docker Compose also we have similar commands. Okay, if you run help, okay, docker compose help, so you can see like similar commands are there. Okay, so attach, build, copy, create, down. Okay, ls, pause, pull. Okay, so docker compose basically treat our complete application, whatever is different services are there, as a single component. Okay, so whatever command you will run like docker compose build, it will build all three applications in single command instead of running for individual one. So that's why even like we have similar commands, but it will be apply on all the services that we have mentioned inside docker compose. Okay, so let's see how it works. Okay, if you want to run like docker compose, first command is build. You want to build uh, uh, all the services. Okay, so after build we will get the images, three images for our application, because three services are mentioned. So we can see here like a docker compose build. Okay, it started, and it is trying to build all our three applications. Okay, two applications it will build from our docker image. And okay, so you can see here it is doing it. So after some time, okay, we can see both the services API and web has been built. Okay, so we can see docker images also. Okay, so we can see like web and API both images just now got created. Okay, And if you see here, like my app, this got appended, okay, as a prefix, because this particular web and API both are present inside my app. Okay, so that's why it used the folder name in which the folders in which like these docker files are present. Okay, so that's why it got appended here. So doesn't matter, that is fine. Okay, so both are there, and when we run at that time, it will pull MongoDB also. Okay, so how we can run now? Okay, so we have seen like docker compose build we use to build the images. Okay, and docker compose up is the command which we when we run this, all the like containers, all three containers will be created and start running. Okay, and communicating with each other, okay, as per networking configuration. Okay, so if we run like this, what will happen, like we will see all the logs and whatever is there on our screen. But if you want to run all three as like a backend, then we can use in the detached mode also, dash d. It will run all three. So if you see here now, this particular like command is pulling the MongoDB also, MongoDB image, and then it will create a container out of it. So now we can see all the components related to our Docker Compose has been created. Like networking also get created, volume also get container created, and all three containers also get created, and it is in started mode. Okay, so let's see Docker. Yes. Okay, it will show all the running containers. Sorry. Mm. Okay, we can see all our three containers. Okay, front end, back end, and MongoDB has been started. Okay, 34 minutes up, and all are exposed on a particular ports that we have mentioned inside the Docker Compose and Docker file. Okay, so 3000, 3001, and 2700, 27017. Okay, so this is the front end. Let's see whether we able to access this particular front end or not on our application, on our browser. So localhost 3000. So you can see, so our React application has started. This is nothing but this is the front end. Okay, and behind the scene, this front end is communicating with backend, and backend is communicating with MongoDB. So this is how this application is working. Okay, and you can see like our front end is up and running. Okay, and behind the scene, it will communicate with back. Okay, so this is how we can use Docker Compose. Okay, and up and run our all three applications. Okay, so now we have to stop all the applications in one command. So it is docker compose down. Okay, so like this it will remove all the containers. So you can see how docker compose is very useful. Okay, if we have like multiple containers that are part of the microservice, so this is very useful to up and running all the containers and do the development and stop troubleshooting. Okay, we can see all the commands which are present inside this. Okay, docker compose help. If you run this, you can see all the commands that we can use as part of docker compose, like pause, pull, push, okay, remove. Everything is possible. Whatever we are doing with the docker command, same commands we can use with docker compose also. In case of docker commands, that particular docker command is applicable to particular uh, container or image. Okay, but here like docker compose, it will apply to all the containers which is part of the docker compose file. Okay, so it is applicable to all the containers instead of individual. So it helps to manage and operate multiple containers in an application. Okay, for development, local development, and local deployment. So hope this tutorial was very useful for you, and please like, subscribe my channel. Thank you so much.